Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session on mines, maps, and minerals. This will be a workshop based on some of the work that we have done at the Pranava Institute, which is the New Delhi-based think tank. Right. Is this good? Perfect. Thank you. So welcome to Mines, Maps, and Minerals. I think the rather intriguing title brought some of you in. This is our work at the intersection of technology and sustainability. How do we actually engage with young people on sustainability when it comes to technological devices? That's the thinking behind this. We wanted to introduce some of the work that we've done. So in this session, a lot of this will be hands-on. I think we'll be trialing out some of this material, getting your feedback on it, getting your thoughts on it. But the idea is to introduce the Unboxing Tech Toolkit project, which is the work that we've done in creating interactive, engaging material that will help young people engage with technology and sustainability, go beyond thinking of their smartphones as just toys that they switch in and switch out every year, and as fashion statements, to thinking more deeply about what are the planetary costs, and doing it in a fun way that a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old will be able to engage with, understand, and enjoy. So we'll talk a bit about the Asia Pacific regional context, which is the sort of context for which we designed this toolkit, and situate the kind of work that we've done. Maybe try this out, get your feedback. That's broadly the flow of the session. So I think this region is very interesting when we look at youth and technology in particular. If you look at the percentage of individuals using the internet, 73% of people in the Asia Pacific using the internet are between 15 to 25. That's a huge number, and that's far higher than other regions in the world. So we're looking at a youth-led and youth-dominated internet, which also means youth-led and youth-dominated consumption of digital devices, which means that is the group that will be that should be targeted when we are looking at sustainability. We're also looking at a spike in digital adoption in both products and services and consumer interactions, which happened during COVID-19. That's the graph on the right. We're also seeing significant rise in internet usage across multiple use cases, which are again digital activities of adolescents. So we're looking at a youth-led internet across the Asia Pacific, and we're looking at a spike which has happened after COVID-19. We're also looking at a very diverse region where some parts of the region struggle with lack of digital infrastructure and digital inclusivity. Digital literacy still remains a challenge. Many people have gotten on board the internet and digital devices, but digital literacy is lagging behind. We are also looking at device penetration of varying rates, and we are also looking at an understanding of values behind technology that differ significantly across different parts of the region. So very diverse region and very diverse challenges and problems that we are looking at. The question we are looking at here is, how do we make sustainability when it comes to the technological use and device use a part of youth conversations today? What is the best way to take that forward? How do we make these conversations happen in schools, communities, and neighborhoods? How can we make young people, give young people space to discuss their digital experiences? How do we enable these conversations around the planetary costs of technology? How do we create holistic and accessible digital education? This is a gap that we noticed when we surveyed curricula of some parts of the Asia Pacific. While a lot of young people are living their lives immersed online, an average of 6 to 8 hours online, where education has been online during the pandemic and multiple critical services, social relationships are online. Their ICT curricula talk about very preliminary basic things like how to use the internet, how to use devices, and so on and so forth. The challenges of navigating a digital world where trust and safety are at the core of conversations, or the planetary costs of their device usage, some of the deeper conversations around technology, sustainability, and us is not touched in digital curricula. So you have a generation of people who are deeply immersed in digital worlds, whose parents do not quite share the same digital experiences that the adolescents share. The teachers are not familiar with it. The communities do not know what's happening. How do we help these young people navigate the internet safely with autonomy and with a sense of planetary responsibility? That's the thinking that animated us by looking at the Unboxing Tech Toolkit. And we believe that if we are looking at 73% of internet users as people between 15 to 25, they are the solution for sustainability. They are the solution for a more trustworthy and safe internet. How do we empower them to reimagine sustainable technological futures? How do we enable them to reimagine different technological experiences which work for the planet and work for the people involved? That is the sort of thinking that animated the Unboxing Tech Toolkit. This is the gap that we aim to address. Titiksha, do you want to take on the Unboxing Tech Toolkit project?
So hi, everyone, and welcome to this workshop. I hope all of you have gotten a copy of the toolkit, or else we'll take a break in a little while and share it with you so that you can see what we built. So just to share a bit more about the project itself, the Unboxing Tech Toolkit project is something we began in 2020. And our core concern was how do we empower youth for a digital age, which has now almost dropped onto them with the COVID-19 pandemic in ways that were unimagined, right? So one of the core things we wanted to do through that is, one, impart the understanding of technology as something which is embedded in the larger fabric of socio-technical systems. So technology is not a standalone thing which we just use, but in fact, it is so deeply a part of the socio-cultural fabric in which it is embedded, in which it is used, and so on. And second, owing, as Shyam mentioned, some of the issues that concern youth as well as young people in the Asia Pacific region, we wanted to touch upon technology, us, and the planet. How do we manage this relationship? And that's why the two toolkits which we have created thus far, the second of which we'll be looking at today, the first one was focused a lot around dark patterns and deceptive design, and was on the more behavioral aspect of what interaction with technology does to us, right? So why this project? This project is aimed at increasing youth awareness and encouraging them to make more sustainable technology choices. And hopefully by the end of this session, you will get a sense of how we are aiming to do that. And second is to deconstruct the deterministic view of technology and envision diverse and non-Western or plural technological futures, which are very much possible given the rich knowledge diversity that the Asia Pacific region in itself holds, right? Shyam, can we move to the next slide? And the way we wanted to do that is essentially by creating open multimedia projects. So both the toolkits are available online, free to download. They are open to translations and adaptation within the classroom. So let's say, Japan or some other country in the region wants to take a copy, an educator wants to translate it into their language and use it. we're very, very happy to kind of do that. And I'll come in a minute to talk about why open multimedia projects are the way to build youth engagement, knowledge, and strategies instead of just looking at the textbook way of learning, which has happened so far. Right, Shyam, can we move? So we believe that the thinking behind this project has been that open multimedia resources can empower and educate. And since these toolkits combine information, graphics, activities, and tools in order to create experiences which can be enjoyed personally, in groups, or administered within classrooms or communities. So let's say you're a parent and you're interested in talking about digital issues with your child and their friends. You can very much host this within your home. You can have them come over and create a space where it can be discussed. The toolkits also include education plus reflection exercises, because a lot of digital education, we believe, does not have to be about knowing more information, right? And this is something we've also discussed in previous sessions around sustainability. We all know the abstract theories around sustainability and reduce, reuse, recycle. But what's more important is things which can help us reflect as well as practically apply this into our daily lives, right? Third is topics which are not included generally in the educational paradigm. And for this, we actually did a survey of sorts of the digital curriculum across different countries and found that most of it was quite outdated and was not talking about these issues at all. So we want to pick up themes which do not find space in the current paradigm, and finally help them deconstruct notions of technology which have just come on very quickly and taken over as the larger narrative through which we understand. Can we move to the next slide? So very quickly, these are the two toolkits which we created. First is the design did it, not me. And that's essentially to understand how technology shapes our behavior and what we must do to gain that sort of control back. The second one, which you'll find in front of you, is about the materiality of the smartphone. And it essentially tries to look at this phone from a material perspective and disintegrate it into getting a better understanding of where it comes from and where does it go once we are done with it. Interestingly, since we wanted to create this in a more participatory way, so the pilots for both toolkits were actually conducted with 30 to 35 young people who participated from different parts, joined us online, and a lot of their inputs have in fact given the final shape of the toolkit. So their feedback has fed into how we've built this out. Is Dhanyashri with us? Can we have her join in? Is the online moderator?
Yes, Titiksha, I'm here.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Titiksha. So let me give you all a brief introduction about the project and the making of the toolkit and other resources. So in this project, we focused on the triad of technology, planet, and we as users, specifically the youth. So having seen the statistics on digital adoption and internet usage of young individuals, the first pillar for us to focus on was unpacking the smartphone usage. In order to help young people understand their relationship with technology, we chose to create open multimedia toolkits using the smartphone as the model. We also wanted to deconstruct the singular unified perspective of the smartphone as an everyday personal gadget or a mere use and throw toy by introducing the hidden complexity of material flows, politics, and design decisions involved in the making of a smartphone, thereby segueing into questions around responsible usage of technology and sustainability. Introducing this complexity will help young people understand that it takes the entire world to make their smartphone and also help situate themselves and their devices as part of the larger socio-technical systems. So we believe that this situated understanding is essential to move away from the anthropocentric approach and promote the engagement of youth in building sustainable technological futures. Now, moving on to the process of implementing all these points through design, can we move to the next slide on design? Thank you. This toolkit can be administered for individuals between 13 to 18 years of age. So the task at hand was not only to cover the above discussed points, but also to present them in an engaging way. So we accomplished this by introducing self-explanatory activities, reflection exercises, and structured visualization activities, which help them understand the entire life cycle of a smartphone from production to disposal. So this would also enable them to reimagine sustainable technological futures and the roles the youth can play towards it. So this toolkit is designed in such a way that it can be administered in different settings, such as a classroom, community space, or your neighborhood, even in small groups or individually. The toolkits can be done online or in print. However, to facilitate better conversation among youth on technology, we urge you to opt for a printed version. Next slide, please, Shyam. Thank you. Apart from the toolkit, the project also includes a facilitator guide, which is meant for educators, teachers, parents, or anyone who's interested in administering the toolkit for young individuals. It is designed to give both the facilitator and the user the freedom to use this in multiple settings. The guide also includes additional resources for reference. Next slide, Shyam. Thank you. We have also curated an online resource list comprising of books, articles, videos, and multimedia links touched upon in the toolkit for users, educators, or parents interested in digitalization and its impact on the environment. So this resource list would also be beneficial to any individual with a passion to work on technology and sustainability. I hope this gives an overview about the Unboxing Tech Toolkit project on the materiality of the smartphone. Now I'll pause here and request Titiksha to take over the session. Thank you.
Yeah, so given how our time is looking like, the next 15 minutes are essentially, we've planned them for each of you to sort of go over the toolkit. We'll have the toolkit also available up on the screen. So yeah, I will just head down there and see if everyone has a copy. Yeah, can you move back? Yeah, and give me a copy. Give me a copy. So as you can see on the first page, we just have like a quick welcome. We have a little bit about you to get the person really involved and personally engaged. So they have to write down who this belongs to, what they will need, a little bit about the toolkit, and let's get started. So the first activity is essentially around when did you buy your current phone? How long did you think it would last when you actually bought it? Right? And how many smartphones do you own? This is a question which we did not initially have, but when we actually did our pilot, we realized that a lot of them did not have just one phone. So they're like, oh, when did you buy your phone? Which one? And so I was like, okay, we need to add a question of how many smartphones do you actually own? Is this your first smartphone? And from there, we sort of go into two parts and talk a lot about the criteria which you considered before buying, right? And this is important because a lot of young people do quite a bit of research before they buy a tech product. They're pretty tech savvy, they know, right? So did you think of the cost, the recycling, the battery life, brand, social proof? Did you talk to your friends about it and they told you this is a great model? Was it a new release, which was very important for you, right? And the idea around criteria was very important for us while creating the toolkit, because later on, we want to come back and tell them that few sustainability related criteria should also be a part of the thinking when you make decisions to buy a smartphone. The second part is where we go a bit into where do you think it comes from, right? Does it come from an online store? Does it come from a physical store which you went to buy? Is it local? Is it even coming from your own country, or is it elsewhere? If it's elsewhere, then which country is that? We also use info bytes as these small information packets across different pages, right? So in the first one, for instance, we talk about how China manufactured 30.5% of global smartphones in 2021. But interestingly, all the countries you see here, which are some of the major manufacturing hubs in the world, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. Apart from China, almost all of them are countries which are currently of interest to us at this fora. So, and I'm sure some of you represent them, and that's why it becomes important. Onto the next page. And Dhanyashri, I hope the online attendees also have their own copies and they're able to access it online. On the second and the third page, we essentially look at how it takes the entire world to make your smartphone, right? And herein we introduce the complex concept of supply chains, right? So we start by thinking about how many countries do you think were a part of the process of making your smartphone, right? And how it was not manufactured in one country. There's a complex supply chain which goes across, which enables something like a phone to be produced. And the associated activity that they have to do with that is on the next page. If you turn to page 3, yeah, you will see how they are asked to essentially trace the iPhone's journey across the globe. And it's very interesting. I urge each of you to take a pen and sort of do it yourself, because when you join the dots, it actually gives you how global this entire process is. Second, we also talk about how rare earth minerals and 3GTs, which are conflict minerals, are a part of your phone, why they need to be an important part of consideration while consumption of technology happens. So tungsten, tantalum, tin, and gold are mined and traded by armed groups in Eastern Congo, and that became a huge international issue to the point that both the EU and the United States now have laws prohibiting this kind of resource use, right? And these areas were notorious for human rights violations and abuses. Mining profits fund their activities, and laws all across the world now try to ensure responsible sourcing to end exploitation and support local development. Now, an important part is when we are buying a phone, we think of many things, but we don't essentially think about, in me using this technology, is another person being harmed? Is another region being harmed? When we are mining for certain resources in Congo or in Rwanda, what are the social and economic consequences of those mining activities? And that's what we want to sort of highlight here. And lastly, we talk a bit about responsible sourcing and repairability. So we also urge them to look at the repairability index of their own phone, which is available online for all of us to sort of check. In the next page, you will essentially find 3 activities which are associated with what we did before. So you trace the iPhone supply chain, you spot rare earths in your phone and where they come from, and then track Fairphone's fair tungsten supply chain. And we want to use Fairphone as a good example of a company which is trying to create phones which are repairable, which are explicitly and transparently telling us about their sourcing practices of these minerals. And that's the sort of idea here.
Just to add to what Titiksha is saying on where does your smartphone come from? The answer that we found in our pilots initially was it comes from a store and it goes to a store. The idea that we wanted to do was to sort of create the complex, and imagine this is a 13-year-old, right? I mean, this is not us. We have an understanding of this, but to a 13-year-old, the idea is to show that it is going across the world. And so many miles are occurred in travel, and so many places are a part of the supply chain. And some of those places are harmed in this if you're not looking at responsible sourcing. So the idea is to open up this device and look at the complexity of supply chains and the ecological and social costs of these supply chains, so that sensitivity about the device comes in. That's the thinking behind this these slides. On to the next page. So the one thing that we did was to sort of open it out geographically and talk about how the rest of the world comes together. The other thing that we wanted to do was, okay, this is a toy. This is a cool toy that helps me do the things that I want to do. But what goes behind this cool toy? What is the kind of human technological or human science and technological advancement that has come together to make this device that does so many things for you, right? And this is to sort of pique the curiosity of those who are geeks and those who have that research orientation among young people to sort of unbox it and think about it in a bit more complexity, right? And it's two simple use cases, right? If you take a phone call, what happens? If you take a picture and upload it on social media, what happens? right? So what really happens? What components are being used? Which rare earths do they come from, right? What components in your speakers and microphones? So the idea is to unbox the materiality of it and make them think of it beyond it just being a toy, right? Once you make them look at it as a serious device with so many components and so much of a footprint and so much engineering behind it, the sense of responsibility naturally kicks in. That's the thinking that animates this page. And we wanted to quickly introduce them to sensors and a bit of the tech behind it in a way that a 13-year-old could get. You want?
Next on, I think this is one of my favorite pages, which is about the life of our smartphone as we use it. And I urge each of you to sort of do this for yourself as well. The idea is that we are constant consumers of the smartphone in various ways in our daily lives. So one is, of course, the economic cost, which we are fairly well aware of, right? How much money did it cost you, not just to buy your phone, but to make the best use of it? So you're constantly spending on it, whether you realize it or not. What are the accessories which you buy along with your smartphone to get a complete experience? And here we want people to sort of write down and check the accessories they own, what did they cost, and how many times do they actually replace it over the span of owning a smartphone, right? So these could be earpods, their data plan, right? Selfie sticks, holders and covers, power banks, headphones, you name it, right? And yes, so we want them to actually write down the cost and add it up in their own jurisdiction. The second is, how much energy do we use to power our devices? So consumption is not just in terms of data or the money you spend, but also constantly using the phone means you are charging it. How long do you charge it for a day? How much do you think that energy costs? The third and the most ignored perhaps is the time and attention cost, right? So, and young people hear this all the time. Someone's always telling them, you're always on your phone. And yeah, that's right. But let's think about that a bit more. Like, what are we always doing on our phones, right? So what activities do we do most of the time? Let's click on those. Are we sure that the smartphone time which we spend is useful and meaningful to us? Does this add joy to our life? Right? Those are questions. And this sort of links back to our first toolkit, where we go a bit deeper into the time and attention aspect of technology use. Finally, in the fourth one, and this is a bit different, is since we talked about minerals and elements from the periodic table before, which are essentially used to create the mobile phone, can you find out which elements you saw in the previous sheets are common and can be found in day-to-day objects? Now, this is, let's just think about it, right? Like, we often think of pen, paper, skillet, and let's say a syringe as very different items. But if you truly think about them, they have a lot in common in terms of the literal material, metals, and minerals that they are made up of. And we want to do something similar for the smartphone. So for example, the first one, which is a bulb, has tungsten as a very important component in it. And tungsten is also used in our smartphones. The second, which is a clock, uses silica. The third one, which are like probably your mending tools, use iron. The fourth, which is a syringe, uses nickel. And we want to tell them that your smartphone sits among these objects as one, right? And that hopefully will change the attitude and the way you perceive your smartphone itself as something which emanates from the earth and goes back to the earth in a particular way. The last two slides essentially talk about the dispose phase. And there we want to discuss, what happens to your phone? Where does it go once you say goodbye? So at some point you decided, okay, I'm done using this. I need a new one. This one needs to be out of my life, right? So from use to disuse, how do you dispose it off is, of course, the most important question. And the second is, what are the reasons or criteria for getting rid of your smartphone, right? And we've provided a small box here for people to sort of write down their own specific reasons, sorry. And from there, we want to sort of get to introducing the concept of planned and perceived obsolescence. So planned obsolescence describes a strategy of deliberately ensuring that the current version of a given product will become out of date at some point or useless within a known time period. So this is very interesting because it could, a well-made product should essentially become useless naturally when it becomes useless, right? But that's when it is planned, it is literally thought of in advance that it's going to become useless at let's say, in a 1 year or a 2 year period. Similarly, with perceived obsolescence is when a customer is convinced that he or she needs an updated product, even though his or her existing product is working well. And this is where a lot of the social dynamics, the social proofing of it is very important. That is something that deeply impacts youth choices. Now, we want them to understand the concept of planned and perceived obsolescence and go back to their list of criteria and see where was planned obsolescence or perceived obsolescence a part of their decision-making process. So one thing we've tried to do here is we've tried to make the link between the concepts, the activities come back to you as a person, which is why the answers for each person in this toolkit will be very unique to them. There is no single right or wrong answer here. It's going to be something that you find out for your own self. And in the last bit, we talk a bit about the afterlife of the smartphone and where does it essentially go. Also talking about how a lot of the minerals used in smartphones have less than 1% recycling rate. So if you need more of them, the only way currently that we have, given technological processes, is to mine further. And this is also true. For example, a lot of conversation around lithium ion batteries or lithium being used in a lot of green products also lands up into, right? Finally, the last page here, and I don't know why the visual is not coming up correctly, but I hope you can refer to your printed copy, is From You to Planetary Future. So far we've talked about you a lot, right? We've talked about you buying a phone, you using a phone, and you disposing a phone. But then what is the connection between you and the planet across this process, right? So you have been the center of attention this whole time, right? We've been thinking about what your relationship with it is, but now let's step back for a minute and realize that this kind of thinking is precisely anthropocentrism, right? Thinking that humans are the central element of the universe and engaging with reality in a way where we are at not just the apex, but at the center at all times is what needs to be shifted. So what if we shifted the focus and made the earth the center of this conversation for a second, right? How would we think differently about technology and the role that it plays in the larger life of the earth, right? And from there, we want to sort of come into probing a few questions around what can we do for the future of us and the planet. So we all work together to build the future we want. We also didn't want to end this toolkit on a dystopic note, right? Yeah, a lot of things are not working out, and that's great. But we want to impart this sense of, us making the right decisions can actually lead to a better future. And how can we imagine that? So we essentially try to probe them by saying, what if you were an innovator, a researcher, a political leader, a designer, right? As you grow old and pick your career paths, how would this impact your actions, and then your actions would create a better future for us all. And the absolutely final page is an absolutely open prompt, which is what is the technological future that you want to live in? And this is very interesting when we especially talk about the Asia Pacific, because a lot of times when we think about a technological future, we all think of the New York skyscrapers, or skyscrapers somewhere is our imagination of the future world. But that does not have to essentially be the case. And the probe is for us to also think about our future in ways which are non-Western, which are plural, which emanate from our own experience of life and long traditions of lived knowledge, right? So this is a very quick sift through of the toolkit, and I urge you to either do this yourselves, or if you want to take a copy back home, you want to share it with others, please feel free to do that as well. Yes. Shyam, over to you.
Thanks, Titiksha. I think we just wanted to give you a quick overview of the toolkit and then open the floor to your thoughts and suggestions. We wanted to get some feedback. Some of the questions that we had were, how can we, what are best ways to engage with communities of educators, if there are some in this room? How do we facilitate translations to different languages, workshops for schools, communities, organizations? Are there ways to include this or bring something similar to this as parts of school curricula? How do we bring these global issues in local context, because the Asia Pacific is extremely diverse? This is a simple proof of concept. We don't claim this to be the best way to do things. This is not the only way to do things, but this is a starting point from where similar approaches can be taken forward. And just open to your thoughts and inputs on this, on how we can take this forward together. If some of you are educators, some of you are people who work in the space, this is a form, a simple QR code from where you can connect to us, and we'd be happy to enable translations or support communities or schools or curricula or policymakers in taking some of this forward. So I think this is a good point to pause and open the floor. Looking forward to your thoughts, feedback, questions, ideas.
So one of the core reasons we wanted to open this out to a non-teen audience as well was to understand how we can take resources like this forward together as a region. Because one of the things that we have gotten as feedback is there's a lot of interest from educators to translate this into their local languages and adapt, right? I would very much like to open the floor for discussion, comments, or questions now. Of course, anything you may want to say, but also vis-a-vis some of the questions we have up here, which are how can we take this forward as a region? Who are the potential stakeholders who we should be engaging with and collaborating with for this particular project? Who do you think we should reach out to in order to make this happen? What are the possible areas of focus in the future pertaining to this project? So here we talked about materiality, but if you think there's another pressing issue in digitalization which needs the engagement of youth, what would that be like? And finally, what are other larger themes which can be incorporated to make this project more holistic in nature? And I sort of open the floor out to you, please. Looking forward to your comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie Hammer. Just focusing on that fourth question you have there, what other larger themes could be incorporated in the future? The theme that occurs to me is what is the rest of the infrastructure that is needed to make smartphones work? What are the landlines, the satellites, all of the transmission technologies, and what are the resources and minerals and energy required in them that actually add to this bill that we have to make it functional?
I didn't see a second question. I'm Chandani Gupta from the Consumer Policy Research Center. Firstly, thank you so much for sharing such a wonderful toolkit. I think it's something that is so inspirational that I think it'd be one that would be great to see utilized in schools at some point. I have a question and I also have a comment. So firstly, my question is, when you did actually raise this with teens and you went through the exercise, I would love to hear what their reactions has been when they've actually gone through it and realized how far their iPhone has traveled or their smartphone has traveled. The other side, in terms of possible opportunities where we could go next, this is just at one point, but it is also a way to show cause for policymakers to think more about planned obsolescence and the right to repair. It's so great that India already has legislation in that space, but this idea that we still don't know from the industry how long they expect it to last, how long they'll provide software updates. Sometimes they are planning the obsolescence purely by the software updates. So trying to use these kind of tools to be able to drive that change where we get really clear-cut options on what does that obsolescence or end of life look like for these products. Thanks.
So thank you so much for the comment. I think that's really important. In fact, something that we are also thinking of how a lot of this information can feed into the larger policy debate around these issues, which is happening in India and other countries in the region as well. So as to your first question, very unexpected responses, in fact. So a lot of times what we thought will click did not click, and what we thought will not click really clicked. And but what has been reassuring as far as the reactions is concerned is, one, I think they really like the sort of pop color, the way it is presented. So it doesn't seem very heavy or gloomy or preachy to them. Otherwise, they're like, hey, you know, you live in a different digital world than I do. And that's sort of the starting point of the conversation. So I think in that, and that's why we made the kind of design decisions that we did in the construction of the toolkit. Interestingly, when we show this to others, the more senior people think it's a toy, but because they're like, oh, you know, it's not serious, it's not a policy brief. But with a younger audience, that was one thing which was very interesting. The second is, I think almost everyone, especially when it came to the cost aspect of it, right? I think that's where a lot of the young people responded very, very positively, because they had never thought about the energy cost or the associated cost. Forget the planetary cost, but also the time and attention cost. I think that was the most interesting aspect for them, given, I think, how crucial it is in their life context. So I think those were some of the parts which really clicked, and there was that aha moment. Oh, I need to think about this more. Yeah.
And thank you for your inputs on the larger infrastructure on which this depends. I think that's something that we'd like to highlight going forward. I think that's also where the internet comes in, and the whole infrastructure that powers what we call the internet comes in. I think that's important for people to know and also become custodians of in some time. Yeah, absolutely.
My name's David Vivian from APrIGF. Yeah, thanks very much for sharing this tool. I think it's really good in terms of awareness raising. My question is, what scope is there within the toolkit in terms of a call to action for the kids who are actually using this tool, in terms of reflecting what they can be actually doing in the short term right now based on the knowledge they've gained in the long term? And also, I think this is a very useful tool in terms of collecting responses, their stories, and actually feeding that up into policy forums. So I'd just like to know where's that link between we're actually collecting the data and in terms of analysing it and advocating for change at higher levels, and where's that mechanism and feeding between the project that you're running and the different mechanisms?
I'd like to say thank you very much. It's very informative and create awareness like all the other people have said. I'd just like to know what the scope is to expand it to include other devices, because most children 13 plus have laptops plus smartphones plus other devices. So it'd be great to sort of incorporate that, and to the other people's points, it then feeds up into policies and how we can actually utilise this information for creating a better sustainability environment we live in.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I have one comment and one question. So my comment is there a specific reason why while you've considered energy costs and environment costs and the time that they've spent, is there a reason why health and if there are any health related issues or health related costs that arose particularly out of smartphone usage were not considered? Because that is something that a lot of my peer group, we face it, but then we talk about it and then we forget about it once that problem is solved. Something similar to how environmental concerns, right? We realize it when there is a wildfire happening, and then we tend to forget about it until the next one. And one of my questions was, the data that you've collected till now from students between the ages of 13 to 18, is that data anonymously, of course, is that data or any analysis of that data published anywhere about what their views are, or is there any pattern that you're seeing that can help us frame these policies better for the future?
Thank you so much for your comments. I think when we are talking about taking this to as youth feedback to public policy or to decision makers, I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think that's something that we are thinking about. But the challenge that sort of comes in is that how do we really collect this in a way that is anonymized? How do we ensure that this feedback is taken safely? We've just completed this project a month ago, but we are exploring along these lines, and suggestions on how best we can do that would be most welcome. And one way, I think that's a dual purpose of this toolkit, right? One is that you help you provide a proto resource that educators and others can use and maybe probably bring as part of curriculums or extracurricular activities. The other is this becomes a funnel to take youth voices back to policymakers in a way that is engaging and serious beyond just a survey. So it's still figuring out the exact modalities of how to go about that and see how it works. I think on the smartphone and other devices, I think the reason we chose the smartphone is that it's one of the most intimate devices, but the smartphone here, the way we did it was a metaphor for technology in general. How do we, if this applies to the smartphone, it should apply to my other devices as well. Another way to think about it is we want to create a prototype of a toolkit that would be engaging for the youth, right? And how do we translate some of the complex research on supply chains and some of these other issues into ways that do not, in ways that a young person's attention span holds and engagement holds. So we're very happy if somebody has different ideas, transmission infrastructure, different devices, different digital issues. Please feel free to adopt and take this forward. We'd be very happy, and we can support you with the kind of work that we've done for the design and other aspects that have worked for young people. I think you.
So Shraddha, is it? Yeah. So to Shraddha's question, actually, one is we did think about health, specifically psychological health, and that's the first toolkit which we didn't get the time to sort of get into today. But I will be sure to share that as well. As far as the more physical health aspects is concerned, it's a lot more, I mean, we tried looking for it, but the science on that seems to be very contested till yet. And I don't want to get into why that contestation exists. We all know there's a larger politics behind that discussion as well. But as far as the psychological harms and impacts are concerned, quite a few pages in the first toolkit, in fact, talk about how do you feel after mobile phone use, right? How, like, so, and there we saw an interesting correlation, because when we actually asked people, what do you do for the most time on their smartphone, and then asked them to go check it, it did not really match. So what they thought they were doing was different from what they were actually doing. I still remember one of these young teen girls who was a part of the pilot, and she spent quite a lot of time on social media. But when we came to the page where it was a lot more about reflection, she said, I feel tired a lot and I feel lonely a lot. And that stuck something. She was like, oh, I'm using social media a lot, but the feelings that are resultant after it are not really great. Now, it may not seem like a great deal to us, but it's a huge deal for a 15-year-old to have that realization and think about, how their relationship with technology is getting shaped in a way which they're not conscious of. So yes, and I will reach out to you after this. To your second comment, which was about analysis or data. So our pilot was done in a completely anonymized, we never recorded it for security purposes, also because a lot of the information that teens shared with us was very personal information. And we did not at the time want to get into how to collect this personal information, how do we make sure that it remains secure and so on. So, but like several of you have mentioned, I think this toolkit has an opportunity. It has that potential to kind of help us articulate voices of the youth, which we get back, and that can, go into policy discussions. So thank you so much for that suggestion. It's something that, we've thought about, but now I think we'll be a lot more confident in taking it forward. Yes. Yes, Dhanyashri, if there are any virtual comments or questions, perhaps we can share them now.
Sure, Titiksha. So far, we don't have any comments or feedbacks or questions from the virtual participants.
Okay, in which case I encourage them, if they have something to say or something to ask, that would be great. Please feel free to unmute yourself and talk, or drop a comment, in which case Dhanyashri will read it out for us. In the meantime, a question I have for the audience here, since we are at the Asia Pacific Regional IGF, and the Youth IGF is a huge part of this discussion as well. A lot of that will feed into the main IGF in Kyoto later this year. I want to also open this question out to what are other kinds of stakeholders or platforms you think we can take this to and engage with in order to push the conversation forward beyond just sustainability, to bringing youth voices more, more actively into this discussion. So any comments there or suggestions will be very helpful.
Thank you. In my other hat, besides running around with the mic and other things, I'm part of the secretariat team for the APrIGF, and we also have the Youth IGF that you mentioned just now. And I think there is quite a large network of youth initiatives that are really interested in talking about these issues, not just internet governance issues, but specifically with sustainability, with how devices are affecting mental health. And I think a lot of them would have great interest in either giving you more information or collaborating. So I would urge you to take this beautiful toolkit that you've printed and actually talk to the young people who are around. I think they're in P5, the other room today. So after this session, please definitely go and talk to them, see if they have different initiatives that do want to collaborate. And I'm also in the middle of looking after the room physically. I'm actually looking through the toolkit, and I think it's a really important and great, I guess this is after the pilot, first edition of the toolkit. One more question I had, I think you mentioned a little earlier as well, is that we are in the Asia Pacific region. We are very diverse. And you mentioned something about languages. I don't know what next steps might be in scaling it to different languages so you can actually go into more local jurisdictions, other states, and see that kind of data to collect. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I'll be sure to connect with people in the Youth IGF and have them engage with this. On the language point, so this has been published under a Creative Commons license, which allows for translation as well as adaptation. And what we do on our end is if someone reaches out to us for translation or adaptation, we give them support from our end to sort of make sure that the translation is going the right way and it's adopted in a way which works out. What we have been thinking though, as far as the translation bit is concerned, is if over the next few years we can ourselves provide some financial support to schools or educators who are interested in translating it so that we can compensate them for their time. And then in that region, it is again available as an open resource for anyone to use. But if you are from an organization which, and you think that this would be beneficial in your communities when translated, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to support in whatever way we can. Yes.
So in response to the question that you asked about youth communities or whether they can collaborate and whether they can help you out with this, I'm sure there are a lot more, but currently I am part of at least 5 of them, which a few of which are in the Asia Pacific, but a lot of these are across the globe. And most of these are youth community members who are interested in the ideas of internet governance, interested in ICT, interested in how that affects our lives and our time. So this will definitely be a great avenue for us to take this forward there. And I would absolutely love it if I could connect you with any one of them or like get in touch with all of them throughout. One more question that one thing that we've observed in the past is when we have an option between a printed version or a virtual version, most of us tend to prefer the one where we can look at it on screen anytime we want, right? Because the printed version, I have it here in my bag and later I'll have to look for it, especially since it's colorful, but it's still paper. So you keep it between 3 books and then you don't realize where it is. But I wanted to ask, is there like a Canva or a Miro board version where you can collaborate and work or answer on it? If it is, then if you can share the link, it would be incredibly helpful.
Thank you, Shraddha, and I will take you up on the offer to connect with these communities. I will share the link to the project website as well for everyone's benefit. So we have the toolkit in the colored version. We have a low resource print version because I know getting colored prints is expensive. We have a black and white version, which looks equally nice, but maybe cheaper to print. We have an online Miro version, which you can just administer for yourself, create a copy and go on. And of course, there's a PDF for those who find it easier to do. Apart from that, I think like Dhanyashri had mentioned, we have a facilitator guide, which has a whole lot of related books, articles, podcasts, and video resources, which someone may want to screen or share. And then we have a resource list, which has a whole bunch of additional resources around the topics that we have touched upon in the toolkit. Yeah.
I think that's 20 seconds to go. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating in this. And we've gotten really valuable feedback. And we look forward to taking some of this forward. And if there's anybody, any communities that you know that we could partner with, the idea was to not think of this as a singular initiative that the Pranava Institute will push forward, but rather to put out an open educational resource that communities can adopt. We can help translations and maybe support future work that is done. So thank you so much for your participation and looking forward to taking some of the connects offline as well. Thank you.
I had to split my brain into two.